There is a move because of treasury pressures and other things away from alliances because there is a perception that they don't add value for money. But if we can actually show that through collaborative contracting we can provide clients with better value for money, then I think as an industry as a whole we'll all benefit.
Well, look, the way I see the collaborative contracting landscape changing in the future is going to be a whole new ways and creative ways to do contracting. I think there's going to be a strong legacy of what people learned in the alliances and ECIs. And it's going to be, I think, a lot of new models, new ways to collaborate, which I think is fantastic. Despite of the fact that the government is taking, let's say, a stronger view in terms of alliances, I think that what we need to focus is on the half of the glass full and see what the opportunities are. So I think people will be experimenting and coming up with fantastic models to collaboration and getting those outcomes they want.
I could see that there will be more of the collaborative type approach into the contracts. I think you won't see here in New South Wales, especially in the road space, alliancing as such. I think the RTA have moved away from that. But there's certainly been a conscious effort to try and pull what has worked from the relationship side of things in alliances into the D&C environment. So I think we will see that the D&C environment is growing, and there'll be more of the collaborative approach that applies there in the road space. And I think that'll also happen in the other transport side sectors as well.
That's really interesting, because where we've come from is I guess the world of pure alliancing. So Australia leading the front in the world really in developing the alliance model, but collaborative contracting, and particularly following on from the Victorian review supported by other treasuries of collaborative contracting is going to be more about competitive tension within selection. But I still think the fundamentals of client, contractor, designer teams working together is tried and tested, and will continue to provide the best solution for people delivering complex infrastructure projects.
This is the way of major projects and major program works will be done in the future. It's a much better way of working. It achieves satisfaction goals for both the contractors and the principals.
And I think it's really just building on that, as working as one team and as an integrated team. That's really the key to it. And I know that from both sides you can see the benefits of what you can actually deliver through this method.
Collaborative landscape, I mean, obviously there are market pressures to bear at the moment, and there is a tendency to be moving away from alliances. I think it's a real shame if we do move away from alliances, because we really do then risk losing the benefits of what we saw in our project, of bringing designers, owners, constructors together under the one virtual organisation to really talk to each other. There's no contractual boundaries, no contractual filtering of that communication. We wouldn't have achieved what we had achieved if we weren't an alliance operating as a new virtual organisation.
Absolutely. So. I can definitely say from my point of view, I know that we had some grade separation projects in there, and I can see when you've got projects with multiple stakeholders that the alliance framework is definitely a good way to go forward. But I know from our side of it, we didn't have the number of stakeholders that you do get in some of those projects, but we definitely optimised the value management side of it, and I think that's something that worked particularly well on our project, was the interaction between the constructor and the designer, and then factoring in the environmental side of it and what have you, and that worked exceptionally well on our particular alliance.
Absolutely, and I don't think you can get that outside of an alliance with a contractual filter in place. So it will be a real shame if alliances do take on a lesser priority, which they seem to be at the moment. I think well, at the end of the day, the taxpayers will lose the value that we can generate.
Sometimes competitive tendering has an effect where it's just the cheapest and nastiest solution is what is actually provided, not necessarily the best value for money and the best long-term product. If you can find a form of contracting that actually provides you with good value for money, then, and that may be not necessarily the cheapest price, but on overall fits in with the budget required, then you can actually have what I call value for money and a good outcome for the project.
Well, I think there's two phases where you got those impacts. Obviously, through the bid phase, it can be quite expensive. Obviously, I'm from a consulting firm, so we tend to still get paid if we're bidding on D&C from the contractors. But there was obviously we're getting paid at reduced rates. The contractors aren't getting paid. They might have a 1 in 4 or 1 in 6 chance of winning, depending on how many people have bid. So I think that the first thing in the selection phase is there is a lot of expenditure, and I think industry can look at more efficient ways of procuring, so that there's not the waste, and you've got the demand on resources now that you can't really free resources up to tender. I think in the second phase, in terms of delivery, then the biggest issue there is that people often retreat to the contractual documents and what works for them, so the project actually misses out. I think that's where, if people could move more to a collaborative approach, then people thinking what's best for the project rather than what's best for me as the contractor, me as the designer, or me as the client. I think that's really the biggest failing of the competitive contracting.
Competitive contracting is very important to the marketplace, and also to ensure that you are maintaining your competitiveness as a corporation. So we will continuously participate in that process. Where the challenge comes into play is there's a high value to collaborative contracting and continuous services contracting, and we have to ensure that we deliver on the value of those relationships, while at the same time making sure over time we maintain a competitive advantage. So the challenge is you always have to make sure you're competitive, but you want to drive those strategic relationships so that delivering continual improvement that eliminates or reduces the need for churn of the competitive market.
The impact of competitive tendering and contracting is, I guess to a degree, if you start moving away from the alliance principles, then you are losing the benefit of the open and honest communication, laying everything out on the table, really taking on the end owner point of view too, because there is a contract, there is filtering that happens from contractual clauses. And I mean, on our alliance, we really did embrace, probably you can talk about that, Colin, the operability and the asset that we're creating. We're not just delivering a project, we're delivering an asset.
Yeah, I definitely think when you're building dams, you're building structures that are going to be there for the next 200 years, and quality is a big factor in that, and obviously the operability of it is a big factor. And I can safely say that on Warralong Dam we put a lot of effort into looking at the end owner and looking at the safety in the operational side of things, and I think we had a really good outcome.
Yep.
I don't think it's necessarily about improving the effectiveness. I think the process today, there are good mechanisms for choosing different teams. I think what you need to look at is what is the selection criteria and what is going to lead to the best value for money. And if you can get the right selection criteria and looking at key things like, well, who are the key people on the projects, what are the key innovations, what the strengths those people can bring, then that is a key thing that needs to be looked at, not necessarily just give 100% to the cheapest price.
Effectiveness of the competitive tendering, the selection process, I think that it needs to be a focus on, first of all, focus on people, in making sure that we select the right people in terms of the skills, how they work as a teams. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people that work in terms of assessment centres, maybe even some kind of testing. And the other one is becoming creative in those tenders. I mean, there's a lot of contractors that are already doing that. To demonstrate to the owners they actually can add value by either saving money or coming up with adding value by coming up with things that add to the environment, to the legacy of the project, and all those non-tangibles that at the end of the day make a huge difference to the project.
I think looking for how we can procure without having to go through the 12-week setting up design and people and various firms replicating what each other is doing. I think that if we can look at for looking at rates and teams rather than something the team's already produced, I think that's, to me, is a more efficient way of looking to procure. Probably doesn't work all the time, but on a lot of D&C type areas you could look to do that. And even if it is just design only work, that you can be looking at the teams of people I've got, what are the fees that they're charging, or what are the margins, and look for the best team that still gives you value in the margin side, rather than going through producing design or other stuff that may get thrown away if you're unsuccessful.
I think it's about doing it sufficiently rather than doing the detail. I think fully competitive talks are going to prove to be very expensive for all parties concerned, and also in an industry that's really resource constrained, is soaking up a lot of resource in two teams doing a thoroughly developed talk, when the resources in one of those two teams could be off actually building something and adding real value somewhere in the industry. And I think there's a real tension there. So I think that getting sufficient work done to price elements of work, so price elements of the package of work rather than the whole talk, could be really useful, and really useful to clients, and really useful in benchmarking going forward when you do the full talk. But I think doing the whole thing is wasteful of resources and too expensive.
If I can add also, I think it's worth spending a lot of time up front to understand the working ethics and the team dynamic. There's been a lot of arm's length submissions, client-contractor relationships early on. Doesn't really set the expectations for how we go forward if the contract was awarded. So spending that time together and working through some of the issues would give a lot better flavour about who would be the most successful proponents.
I think you can improve the effectiveness of it by generating a number of partners that participate in that process that you're familiar with, so that you can be more efficient and effective about the process, thus quicker, and your solutions in the market are much more eloquent and more efficient.
I think it's we have to set the goals. We have to understand what we want from the teams. We get to a position where we just expect great safety performance, great community relations, etc., and we're looking for innovation. That's the way we've just got to improve.